The Campo and Joe podcast is brought to you by Bold City Heating and Air. Fast and reliable AC service.
Welcome in Facebook Live. If you're tuning in via Facebook on 1010XL, we totally appreciate it. If you're picking us up with the podcast that you grab on your own time, we love that you're doing that as well. Joe C. from XL Primetime, our head coach Dave Campo, as we talk Jaguar football. It's not just all of Duval, it's beyond Duval County, but we're going to talk Jaguar football. The biggest news is they've hired a defensive coordinator, coach, and I definitely think that we're trying to attack it from a handful of different angles. But I also will point out that January 23rd, 2000, this is the 24-year anniversary of this team playing in an AFC championship game here in the city of Jacksonville. Yeah. So we'll go back and recount that just a little bit. But I'd like to start off with the decision that they made, Ryan Nielsen being hired as their defensive coordinator. You all know this by now. Coach Campo has coached a lot of defense. What do you think of the decision that they made to hire a guy who's only been calling plays for a year now?
I think it's more of an attitude than anything else. I think, he's been around some good coaches. He's considered an outstanding front coach, which I think is really important. I think we got to get more out of the front. I think one of the keys is going to be him bringing in a secondary coach, because I think he'll need a little bit of help on the back end, because usually those D-line coaches are pretty zeroed in on the run and the pass rush. Mm-hmm. So I like it because I think he's a aggressive attack mode type of a guy. And to be honest with you, I think we're missing that. Mm-hmm. I think he has a little different personality from what I understand than Coach Peterson is. He's a little bit more, out front, aggressive. And I think that's good. I don't think that you can have, I think he and Mike Caldwell and Coach were a little alike in that frame. Mm-hmm. So I'm happy with it. I think a lot's going to depend, though, on who they bring in as a secondary coach, because I think that's going to be really important to get a guy that works well with him.
I want you to explain that to everybody, because, look, we know the defense. And by the way, let's just start off with I don't know if Coach and I share in the exact same opinion, but both sides of the football did not come up when they needed to with the winning results down the stretch. From December 1 on, when they had a chance to be a number one seed, they were playing for it at that point. They lost 5 of their next 6 games. It wasn't just the defensive side of the football that failed, but they made their decision. And so now Doug thinks he can fix the offensive side, and now he's going to find somebody to fix the defensive side. But I would love for you to explain to people what you mean when you say, okay, he's a defensive line coach, and he needs to make sure someone takes care of the back end. Explain that.
Well, first of all, the general consensus of over time, the linebacker coaches are usually the coordinators. Mm-hmm. And the reason for that is they have to, with their guys, have to deal with the front as they're growing up. They're linebacker coaches, so they're involved with the front, but they're also involved with the coverage because they are dropping. A defensive line coach is usually just zeroed in on the front, period,
right,
and what they do. So generally, the linebacker coaches are the coordinators, and the D-line coach is the D-line coach, but the secondary coach or pass coordinator or whatever you want to say is the guy that kind of handles the pass defensive part of it. So you have to have two guys that work well together in order to have a defensive line coach, and the vice versa. If you have a secondary coach, you got to have a defensive line coach that's on top of what's going on with the front, and that has to be a mesh.
Yeah. Well, I think when you're talking about the communication part of this, that's as important as anything. And I think if you did see something erode down the stretch, it was playmaking, poor tackling, and probably communication. Yep. And so when Ryan Nielsen comes in, we don't know a whole heck of a lot about him other than statistically what we can see on the football field. And numbers-wise, his team stacked up pretty well on the defensive side.
Well, he went from 27th in a lot of and it might have been 27, 26, 24 with different aspects. But basically, he took a defense that was 27th the year before, and they finished like 17th. Now, that's a big, big difference. and they finished like 8th in pass defense.
Right.
And from my understanding, I know people that know the situation. They said that they got great pressure on the quarterbacks without having a great pass rusher, which means his aggressive nature, his blitz package, all of those things helped them in the passing game as well.
And I think that's what you're trying to figure out is the style, the play, the communication. Look, there's a lot of things, and you would work countless hours. There's a lot of things that go into game planning week to week, month to month, self-scouting, figuring out if someone's figuring you out, all that type of stuff. And at the same time, you got to keep convincing guys to play hard, to play smart, right?
Right. And I think that that's one of the things that he in listening to the players talk and the radio, you guys have had guys from that know him, that played for him, whatever. Right. They all say the same thing. He talks all the time about attacking the line of scrimmage, be aggressive, those kind of things. It's just over and over and over again. And that's the attitude part of it, that you develop a culture of, I don't care who we have or who we're playing. This is how we're going to play. This is going to be our identity. This is going to be, they're going to have to, when they watch us on tape, they're going to have to say, hey, we better bring our A game.
Yeah. And I think that there's been so many times where I've asked you the question, or all of Duval has asked us the question, who do they fear on the defensive side of the ball?
Yeah.
And you can walk, let's just go to this last handful of games, which we'll touch on the divisional round and then the championship round. Excuse me. Aiden Hutchinson has made himself very visible to offensive coordinators. You have to account for him. And you go down the line with the Boses and the Youngs and all them on San Francisco's, and we can do the whole deal. Is there a guy? And there's not a guy right now because there hasn't been enough guys that have been developed on that side.
And that's a problem. And I think,
Josh Allen became that guy.
Well, he became it from the standpoint that they had to pay a little bit more attention to him, which gave Walker a chance to progress.
Yeah.
So that's part of it. And I really think the best thing that Doug did this year in this cycle here is to keep the outside linebacker coach that coached those two guys.
Bill Shuey, yeah.
Because that now gives, whether they have their hand on the ground, if they go 4-3 or whatever the philosophy is,
right,
or whether they're still standing up, those guys developed during the course of this year. And I think that that's where a guy like Nielsen, if he can firm up the inside guys and what they're doing, and his deal with the linebackers is attack the line of scrimmage, I think that's a plus.
Right.
They're going to improve there. Now it comes down to, can they do the philosophy that he has? There's the back end. Do you have somebody that can coach it up pretty good? Or do you bring other guys in that can play man defense or whatever it is? That's going to be important.
Yeah. And so concepts, personnel, a lot of these things have to be decided going forward. And we'll spend time on Campo and Joe talking about how certain guys match up. We're going to talk about maybe assistants that he might be able to bring in as well coming up in a second. But when you just think of conceptually what he wants to do, a 4-3, what pieces do you like that this football team has that you think might be able to thrive or flourish in a 4-3?
Well, first of all, the inside guys, the guys that played the nose and the 2-5 technique tackles, they either got to get better there, or it doesn't matter whether you play a 4-3 or a 3-4. Those three guys are going to be on the field, in one way, shape, or another.
Right.
So they have to either bring some guys in, or they got to get those guys playing better. The outside advantage is the outside players, the Josh Allen and Trayvon Walker, I believe will flourish more in the 3-4 because their on the 4-3 because their hands are on the ground. And I think that's a tremendous advantage. And I think we have two guys that can put their hand on the ground, can play the run, and can rush the passer with greater efficiency even than they did. But now they've got to find two guys inside as opposed to three with those inside guys. Your 5 technique, one of your 5 techniques is going to be one of those outside guys.
Okay.
And so now you got 2 guys inside rather than 3.
All right, so let's just explain the 5 technique and what we at least visualize, because you've been salivating over the idea of Trayvon Walker with his hand on the ground. I tend to agree with you because I think he's strong. He generates a lot of power. He's very athletic, and I think he can win, in that moment trying to get around a defensive an offensive tackle. Now go to the 5 end where he would fit in, and then also if he can slip inside.
Well, here's the thing. When you're deciding on whether you're going to be a 4-3 or a 3-4, okay, just philosophy-wise, disguise from the 3-4 is a little better because your 2 outside linebackers can rush and drop.
Okay. Big deal.
They're standing up.
Mm-hmm.
So you don't know necessarily which one's going to be in the rush this time and which one's going to be in the drop.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's philosophy, right? The other philosophy is when people talk about the 4-3 as opposed to the 3-4, in the 3-4, you have to find 3 big guys.
Okay.
In the 4-3, you have to find 4.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? That's the difference, right? Because now, if you're in a 4-3, those guys are considered run defenders.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? So the outside guys. So in my opinion, it's harder to find the big guys than it is those linebackers that can stand up and rush and pass.
Right.
Drop.
That makes sense.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's why guys go to the 3-4, because they find 3 big guys
Mm-hmm.
and 2 guys that rush, drop, whatever. When you go to the 4-3, they've already got one of those extra guys in
Okay.
Trayvon Walker.
Mm-hmm.
Trayvon Walker is capable of being an outside end with his hand down,
Mm-hmm.
okay, and a guy that can go inside on a tackle or on a guard in a what we call a 3 technique.
Yeah.
Okay. So they really have to only find one more guy. They've got the 3 without the 3 big guys.
Okay.
Trayvon Walker becomes the 3rd big guy,
Mhm.
right? Now you've got Josh Allen, who, in my opinion, can be an open side, outside end
Mm-hmm.
with his hand on the ground.
Strong, quick, all the different
All
moves.
of quickness and that
Yeah.
type of thing.
Mhm.
Will he be as good on a tight end? Probably not. But they have to put the tight end over there,
Mhm.
which opens up Trayvon Walker on the other side.
Okay.
So in my opinion, they've got the ingredients to go to a 4-man line
Mhm.
every down because of Trayvon Walker
Yeah.
more than anything else.
Yeah, and I think that the fact that the personnel is always going to be part of the debate. Hey, who do you have on your roster? Hey,
Right.
how does that match up with what the coordinator wants to call? And I think I asked you this question on XL Primetime, is that I don't know what the better version is, the player dictating what the philosophy or defense is, or the defense, which if it's good, it's good, you want it, then you find the players to fit it.
You know, here's the problem that you have in college football. You can basically recruit to the defense.
True.
Because
Especially if you consistently have the results.
Now it's changed a little bit because now the colleges are getting as impatient as NFL owners are. So you better do it within 3 or maybe 4 years or else you're out of there.
Mhm.
In the NFL, if you don't do it in 2 years, you got a chance to be out of there because there's one guy making a decision. So it's a little bit more difficult to get players
Mhm.
that fit what your philosophy is.
Mm-hmm.
So to be a good defensive coordinator, you've got to be able to not alternate, but
Mhm.
you have to change with who your personnel is. And an example of it is when we were in Dallas, we were a 4-3 defense.
Mhm.
We had 3 small linebackers, but the middle linebacker in a 4-3 defense has got to be a guy like Aluakun
Mhm.
that can go sideline to sideline.
Mhm.
That middle linebacker has to be able to go sideline to sideline. We had those kind of guys. But when we lost a couple of those guys and we got a middle linebacker, we lost Robert Jones,
Mhm.
Zay Jones's
Oh, yeah.
son,
Yeah.
father.
Mhm.
we had to bring in a guy that was a 3-4 middle linebacker.
Mm-hmm.
So we had to go to more 3-4 principles because he couldn't go sideline to sideline, but he could play over the top of the guard.
Mm-hmm.
So we had to change. And we went from number 5 in defense to maybe number 6 in defense when we made the change. And that's what you have to be able to do in this league.
All right. You mentioned the linebackers. I want to ask about that. But first, at least answer this last little begging question with the front. If you do have Allen, like you said, Trayvon, they all seem to suit the idea of the 4-man front. Give us that interior. And with who they have, Devon Hamilton.
Yeah.
I think you like the idea of him playing the 3.
Well,
technique.
He looks like, to me, to be a type that could be maybe a 3 technique because he's quick off the ball.
Mm-hmm.
He's been playing in their scheme a nose, the guy that's on the center, because
Mm-hmm.
he's got pretty good size. But I think he could maybe be that type of a guy. I think they have to go get somebody that's like a Donald or a Jones or guys that are extremely quick off the ball for the 3 technique. And whether or not they have that ability, that I don't know. I mean, whether they can go get somebody.
Yeah, because Coach just named 2 of the best players at that position. Interior.
Exactly. Yeah. So to me, I think that those 2 guys inside can be a little bit interchangeable.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they can move one way or the other. You just need 2 guys in there that are pretty physical. And if you're really good, you got a 3 technique that can get up the field and make something happen.
And I would like to see a Devon Hamilton, a healthy Devon Hamilton, and see what he can do. But you can't sit here and wish and hope. You got to make sure that you got some studs inside that take you back to Stroud and Henderson, days when you were around. You certainly know coaching inside that building, what it takes. All right, let's go to the linebackers. Because if you do move those guys up, Chad Muma's sitting on the bench. I think just wasting away. He had a chance to start, had to basically pick up the slack that Devin Lloyd left because Lloyd was a little lost in his rookie year. Bottom line is you never see both of these cats on the field at the same time. And so now you might have a chance to have that.
Yeah, you could get them on if you're going to go 3 linebackers in certain situations. Muma might be that guy. He may be the strong side linebacker, okay? But to me, there's so much nickel played. You're really talking about the 2 inside guys. And the thing I like about Nielsen is he has a reputation of their linebackers attacking the line of scrimmage. A lot of tackles for loss, a lot of gap situations where they're blitzing or they're attacking the line of, the gaps when they get the run defense going. So I think Aluakun and Lloyd are going to be the 2 guys. And I think Aluakun's a pretty good middle linebacker. I think he's a guy that can go sideline to sideline and make some things happen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so that's the type of guy. Aluakun is well, I guess right now, since he was a free agent, the priciest. Devin Lloyd was a first-round pick, and you're going to have to make a decision on him going forward.
The Campo and Joe podcast is brought to you by Bold City Heating and Air. Fast and reliable AC service.
And then Muma, they just have to get plays out of guys that are on the roster. For goodness sakes, you now have back-to-back years of third-round picks that haven't done a whole lot. Tank Bigsby being the most recent one. And then Chad Muma, who did step up in his rookie year, was hardly asked to do anything in his second year.
I think that really comes down to whether or not your evaluation is correct. Because I think when you get to the 3rd round, I think it was one of 2 things. They either were not quite sure, what Lloyd was going to do, what position he was going to play or whatever. They felt that this guy was really a pure middle linebacker, and maybe he was going to take Aluakun's place down the road.
Possible, yeah.
Or he was the best available player in their eyes. And that's subjective.
Sure it is.
There's some other guys beyond him that are pretty good players.
Yeah.
So it really comes down to what your draft, how you set your draft up and really what you're looking for there.
Yeah. And so we'll find out what it looks like going forward because it definitely is going to be a begging question. We mentioned the assistants, and we don't know exactly who he'll bring along with him, but Ryan Nielsen spent time in New Orleans, was part of coaching staff that coached up that defensive line, including what Cameron Jordan became as a very, very good player. And then you could throw the other ones out there, Trey Hendrickson and some other ones that he coached even back in college at NC State. He coached up Bradley Chubb and a couple of other guys. Manny Lawson might have been there as well. Yeah. But now let's go to the back part of it and the assistants, and mentioning the idea of a couple of other names that have popped up, maybe joining this staff.
Yeah, well, Jerry Gray is one of them. And Jerry was I think he's assistant head coach.
Assistant head coach and secondary.
Jerry's a really good coach. He's experienced. He's the type of guy that you want to go along with a guy that's front oriented, because he can handle his business on the back end. And a little tough to work with sometimes, but obviously they've had a marriage there. He's been the secondary coach and with Nielsen. So I really think that he would be a good addition, because I know he can coach technique, and I know he knows how to coach different aspects of the man game, which has been a problem with this team, with the bunches and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. He knows how to handle all those things, I'm sure. And that would be a plus in my mind if, number one, they can get him there, and number two, whether or not their marriage was a good marriage. And the other name that I heard was Dave Huxtable, who was a GA. I'm dating myself. He was a GA when I was at Iowa State back in the day, a long time ago. So that ages me pretty easily. But Dave had been a college coach for a long time. And, I think sometimes college coaches have to coach a little bit harder than NFL coaches. So he's probably a pretty good teacher. Yeah,
and that's what you want. And right now, like we said, there's a little bit of guessing going on our part. There's also people that we talk to that we feel has a pretty good handle on what's going on. And there's no question that this team needs to be a little more on their game, preparation-wise, every moment of every week, doing the work that's required. That means the player has to feel some responsibility, and the coaches obviously have to feel some responsibility.
I think when you're talking about, I'm gonna go soft with this, but right now there are more ex-players coaching in the NFL, and you're either going to get real good ones or you're going to get real bad ones, not in the middle, because the difference between what they did as players is some of them are not technique oriented because they were so good that everything was easy to them. They didn't have to figure out, look, I got to cover this guy. How am I going to do it?
Right.
Okay.
Like they would wait for you to do all the intel, and you tell them what to do, and then they go, okay, I got this.
Yeah. And so they didn't have to do a whole lot. And some of them, the hours involved and the time involved is different when they're players as coaches. There are others that they've been a coach on the field their whole career. So those guys have a chance to be really good because they command a certain amount of street cred with the guys. And the reason I'm bringing that up is that the whole defensive staff, there were 3 guys on this staff that were players in the NFL.
Yeah.
And they are not here any longer. The one guy they kept was not a player in the NFL. He was a lifetime coach. So the reason I'm bringing that up is there's a lot more to it than just putting the best player on the field. There's a lot. You have to have a cohesive staff that can work together, and that's going to be a big part of what happens on that side of the ball.
And just to stay on this for 1 second, if you were to pull up the Atlanta Falcons and take a look at their depth chart, and again, this is not always a perfect picture, but you will find what Ryan Nielsen was coaching with was not necessarily a lot of first rounders. You had Calais Campbell, who we know how good he is, but also long in tooth. Okay, so he had a 1-year deal. And coach, if I'm showing you this, you got an undrafted free agent playing nose tackle, undrafted free agent playing defensive tackle. You have second rounders. You have 3 rookies that are on the 2 deep. As far as the defense is concerned, you have another undrafted. I'm telling you what, you have quite a few that are either first, second, or third-year guys that are all stepping up and making plays, and that's what you hope you can get a group of coaches that will maximize talent.
Absolutely, and that's hopefully what this hire is. And to me, time will tell, but there's a lot of, listen, not everybody is Deion Sanders. You got to coach.
Yeah.
And you got to put in the time to coach, and you've got to be a teacher. And to me, it looks like what they did with Atlanta this year is they had some pretty good teachers over there. So let's get that staff over here. We got one of them. Maybe it is, Jerry Gray. Maybe it is another guy. Whatever it is, let's get the best coaches we can over there.
Yeah, because I'm just going back and looking, and Caden Ellis is one of the guys that we mentioned on XL Primetime that was involved in a number of tackles for loss, a handful of sacks.
Yeah, he's middle line or a linebacker.
Right? Inside linebacker, played at Idaho. And when you just take a look at a guy like this, I mean, there's nothing overwhelming as far as his bio goes, but he comes out, smart guy, ready to jump in, played in New Orleans, so Nielsen knew something about him. 28 years of age, but he 5 years experience, and he was an undrafted dude. And so those are the types of guys that you need on your football team.
Absolutely. And you got they're all over the league. In the old days, it used to be 12 rounds in the draft. Now there's only 7. So there's a lot of other guys running around out there that are undrafted that can be pretty good football players. You just have to find those guys.
All right, we're going to wrap it up, but I'm going to ask you for one thing that might have surprised you from this past week, and then one thing that you think might happen in Championship Sunday football. Real quick, I'll go first. So I'm not throwing you on the spot.
Right.
But the way the Packers played San Francisco, basically toe to toe, until Jordan Love made a mistake.
Yep.
I was surprised by that. Now I picked the Packers in the points, and I laid the points against the Houston Texans because I thought of these two games, both of them were basically 9-10 point underdogs. Which one of them would surprise me? Anyway. Texans end up getting blown out, and the Green Bay Packers toe-to-toe with the San Francisco 49ers. So I'm glad I took the points, but I was still surprised by that.
Right. I was a little surprised with the San Francisco game. That was probably my biggest surprise because I really felt that San Francisco, with a week off, they weren't going to get surprised. And I think that's a perfect example. Some of us are real quick to say, they got injured. Well, everybody gets injured. Okay, well, that's great. Yeah, except it's who that gets injured. Is a tremendous factor. When our quarterback got banged up, that's a big factor, right? We lose. I personally think that when we lost Kirk, we lost the middle of the field. Big time receiver.
Very much so.
And so now, all of a sudden, why did we not perform as well? We went downhill when Trevor got hurt the first time, and then he was hurt the next time, and he was hurt the next time. Well, when San Francisco lost Deebo Samuel, not only did they lose a great player, but during that week, those 2 weeks, getting ready for the ball game, I guarantee you that he was an integral part of the game plan. Now, if you lose them and it's 3 games later, you can put somebody in that role and maybe be okay. But when you go into a ball game and he's an integral part of it and he gets hurt, that's now your coordinator's going through a lot of stuff in his head. What do I do? How do I get into this package? Who do I put in here? So that's more, to me, was a big factor in that game. I really think that if he had played, they would have won the game by more points. Now, I don't know how many points more, but, I think that was a factor.
Yeah, he was we're talking about McCaffrey, we was the engine.
Yes.
But then there's that X factor guy, if you will.
Absolutely.
And that's what Deebo was.
Yeah.
Championship weekend, I feel like we're going to get a great game. Lamar versus Mahomes. How can we go wrong there?
Yes.
And then hit that one and then hit the other one that we
got.
Well,
if that one, I'm next to last in our picks on prime time as far as who's going to win and who's going what the spread is and all that. But to me, a champion is a champion until they're not.
Right.
So, Kansas City was my upset special this week, and I think Kansas City will be the upset special again. I just think that the team has been there, and it's a little bit different for Baltimore because they haven't really gotten where they wanted to go. Everybody will be rooting for Baltimore. Yeah. There's no question about it.
It's a great story.
And if Lamar gets going, you don't know what's going to happen. In the other game, everybody is rooting for Detroit, and I have to say they've got a pretty darn good football team put together with a great attitude. Yeah. And I think that's going to be another really good football game. If Debo plays, I'm taking San Francisco. If Debo doesn't play, I'm taking Detroit.
Yeah, and that's it. They say his shoulder's okay, but we'll find out. But hopefully, as I'm calling them on the show, my Lions will make it. All right, Coach, always a good time. We appreciate everybody tuning in to Campo and Joe. You can obviously look forward to this entire offseason. We'll be breaking it down as much as we can. Joe C. from XL Primetime, our head coach, Dave Campo, thanks to you for hanging out with us.
This presentation of the Campo and Joe podcast is brought to you by Bold City Heating and Air, fast and reliable AC service.